Hi, my name is David Cuthbertson. I'm going to show you how AssetGen Connect can help you with data center planning and management tasks. As part of managing all data centers, we have to manage space, power and connectivity. We have installs, decommissions, changes, and as a result of that there's a lot of complexity. Part of what we'll often have to do is create simple build instructions for people to carry out tasks, and also update floor and rack diagrams showing where things are, reporting back on capacity, not just from an allocation perspective, but also to then show available capacity, resources that are not yet in use. And as much as possible we want to try and automate a lot of the documentation and updating, because there tends to be quite a lot of it, and the key thing here is never to make any mistakes or have any problems. Because of the risk issues that you have changing core infrastructure, there's a lot of reverse engineering and verification and checking to make sure everything is really well understood. If you don't have something like AssetGen, you end up often doing site surveys, getting people to go and just confirm things, just so that there's no miscommunications. And the whole point of AssetGen is to try and complete and deliver tasks within seconds, not hours or days, because we actually need a greater understanding and we don't necessarily trust the information we have. So a lot of AssetGen is all about process and communication. On the right hand side you see that we'll be using AssetGen Connect to look at the physical side, but AssetGen Connect also links into our SysMap software, where we have information on virtual systems and services and business use, so that we can then do a change impact analysis of any activities that the data center teams are doing for their own maintenance needs, such as rebalancing power and moving things between data centers. Here's a very simple workflow covering how change requesters typically will request changes, which then need to be planned and understood and then communicated through to third parties to do a build. A couple of challenges we have with that, and the first thing is the change requesters don't always understand the terms and the jargon that the planning teams use, and they don't necessarily have access to all of the information sets, the master records for capacity, and also an understanding of the policies. So part of the planning process is to assess the requests and then go back, often with an outline design, and confirm before they take anything further, simply because they want to make sure they have a good understanding. So somebody may have requested to put in a server, connect it up to the storage systems, but hasn't mentioned anything about power or about out-of-band management. So that's why we need centralized teams to make sure there's consistency. Another problem is there's actually often a lot of documents which have to be maintained, and there's a lot of manual processes involved in all of that. You may think it's a good idea for the change requesters to actually look at the documents that the planners use. The trouble is finding them and also knowing what's the latest versions and communicating that through. So if you don't have something that's consistent, it gets very confusing. But it's still down to the data center teams to avoid all of that and make sure they have a clear understanding so they can allocate appropriate resources. We also have other teams involved, such as service management and operations, where it's useful for them to have an understanding of what the planners know to help them update their own incident and change workflows, often through their CMDB or service desk, and also to update recovery documents for servers. So it needs to be rebooted, what should the process be, and also to direct engineers who are maybe replacing disk drives or equipments or decommissioning, so that then they can support the infrastructure planners, but operationally they need to do things very, very quickly. So it's useful if they can also interrogate and understand information held by the data center teams, but from a practical perspective, how do they get access to it, and what if there's too much? So a lot of this is all about communication. AssetGen Connect is built using a combination of buildings, cabinets, equipment and connections, so we can see how things are connected and where they are. We only need 4 spreadsheets to completely build this system, and so when we're baselining an organization, anything more than the 4 spreadsheets just shows the amount of duplication that there is. But those 4 spreadsheets covering buildings, cabinets, equipment and connections is effectively what we would compress everything down to, and then we would use our system to build out all those various capacity views, paths, connections, Visio diagrams, and I'll show you some of the techniques for how we do all of this. So let's just start with a simple workflow process, and I'll start with a quick search here, where a request comes in: could we connect server win 001 to a storage switch, because we need to add an additional connection. Could the data center team make it happen? And so I'm going to search for that device, but I'm not going to put in the full name because there's something a bit odd about it. And so if I go and do a search, and I just search for server win, we can actually see the first thing is the name was wrong of the server. It's actually got 3 zeros. Maybe it's been renamed for some reason. But actually the request has used what he thought was correct. But actually in the data center terms, we've actually got 3 versions of the server. We've got the production version, and we can see on the right hand side different statuses. It looks like there's probably a replacement for that server planned for the future. We pre-allocated the space, but it may be a project that may be happening in the next year. And then we've got an old version which actually looks as though it's in the same rack, where actually maybe we've not fully decommissioned it, but we've got it there waiting for somebody to pull it out, and we've just appended old onto them. So as you can see, somebody wants something done, but you have to check and make sure that there's no misunderstandings. Let's assume it's the production server. So if I click on here, this has now taken us to that server. We can open up and see the connections. There's one connection currently free, which happens to be fiber, so it sounds like it's probably the right one, but we may just want to check and say, is it actually port 1 in slot 1 that you want connected? Because port 1 in slot 3 is already connected. Is this a duplicate request, or is it very definitely that? And this comes down to, you could then say that the information you get provided from the requesters, it's not always as good as you'd like. In this particular case, there's no fiber panels that go off to where the storage switch is. I've looked and checked a few things, so I'll just connect this up. And this is how I do it. I'd select the port, do a right click, and do a patch connection. This will open up the connection screens, so we can see the connection on the left hand side, where do we connect it to on the right hand side, and I've been working actually on this storage switch already, so it's in my most recent list. And the first available port is port 18. Port 17 is reserved at the moment for another project. Let's do port 18, and I'll connect that up with a fiber patch. You can edit these lists as to what your own conventions are. We'll put in a length because we can look at a floor plan and determine roughly how long the cable is going to be, and give it a little bit of extra. Because this is in the same row of cabinets, it's going to make it easy just to go through the cable tray above the racks. And then I might put a color cable, we might have a label on the cable. Everyone has a slightly different process. If I save this, this has now allocated that port for this particular task on both sides. And if I come out of this mode and go back, we can now see we have the connection, and I can just confirm the connection on the right hand side that there's a patch for 20 meters connecting these two together. To create the build instruction for this, I'll do a textual instruction, run a quick report. So here's a textual view giving which cabinets do you need access to, and what are the names of the devices, and what are the actual ports we're going to be connecting to. Alternatively, I could create a spreadsheet, so I can do it from here. Another option that a lot of customers do is they take the devices that are involved, they do a port trace on the whole device, and then they maybe bring out a spreadsheet output showing all the paths, because they may consolidate multiple work requests. And here you can see, here's all the various connections on the server, and we're going to consolidate these. We'll pick out the ones that may be involved, because we may have to give different instructions to different trades or different teams as part of this. And that's created the first part, which is the work instructions. To complement that and to help make sure that there is yet again no misunderstandings, a lot of customers will then take the rack, create an updated rack diagram. So if I go here to cabinet diagram, this will produce a Visio diagram of that rack to complement our connectivity instructions. I'm going to tick rack number 109, which is where the storage box is. Maybe give it a title and press draw. This has now created a Visio file with 2 rack diagrams. A lot of customers will highlight the particular equipment, so this equipment here, we might put a red box around it. That's the one where we're coming from. If I click on rack number 109 here on the second tab, here I now have, it'll be this box here. I might put a red line around that as well. And then I have this as something to complement the work instructions, so there should be no mistakes. We know exactly what we need to connect, we know exactly where it is. Very quick and easy process. This filter screen that we use to create those rack diagrams, we can also create all the operational views of the data center as well. If I click on the computer room here, this will now do all the racks in that computer room and put it into one file, so that then This can be then used by the operations teams to know where any piece of equipment is, should there need to replace something or do some break fix work, like maybe a disk array has got a problem and one of the disks needs to be replaced. They don't actually need to generate these because we can automate this process and say that operationally every rack diagram for every room will be produced every night. So nobody needs to generate them, they're already available. You don't need to wait for them to be done, and it can just be an overnight process. The same also with other types of diagrams, and let me show you a few different perspectives. So here for instance is a floor plan of a data center, could be equipment rooms as well, and we've embedded a lot of information into Visio so that then you can create your own dashboards with space and capacity. So just an example of various things which AssetGen allows you to do. The first thing is the function of all these cabinets. Let's color code them so it's easy to understand. And I've just turned this view on or off. This is Visio functionality that you could say comes with AssetGen. This could be by customer, it could be by environment. There's many different ways of actually doing this. You may want to see from a space perspective. So by clicking here we can see which racks are the fullest, or how much space there is, which would help if we had lots of servers to install and we want to put them in contiguous racks. We may want a level of detail. So this particular view is showing you the circuit breaker feeds into each rack and how close we are in terms of the current design capacity with all the equipment that's actually in there. So we can see where we're pretty close to some limits. You can do this yourself. There is many different ways to explain and understand things, but there is only one diagram doing all of this, which we refresh and keep up to date for you. You've seen how we can do rack diagrams. We can also create topology diagrams that show how the networks or the storage or the power or all of them all interact together, either on one device or multiple devices. Part of what we do is we're able to change all the different labels on the equipment and the different symbols. So here you can see we've got some information. Because we've embedded data, I can also change and then say show us a different format that may be better for another purpose. So there's lots of different ways to extract out to save you time. These could be project views to help with the planning process. They could also be operational views, so all network diagrams for all buildings are updated every week. So nobody needs to produce them, but they're all done in a consistent way from the same information that's being used for planning and management of day-to-day operations. Now we may want higher level views than this, so I might produce schematics that show how the cabling goes between various rows or cages or rooms, and also then display capacity information on there. A feature that we do with all Visio diagrams is we give you the ability to hyperlink directly into devices. So if I look at this patch panel here, I can click on it and it takes you straight into our web interface on that device. Without ever having been there, I can open it up. I can see the type of ports and connections on there. I can see the naming conventions, I can see what's in use already, and I can do this from anywhere. If I want to get a better understanding of what those ports are actually used by just doing a port trace, I can bring out a textual report that shows every single port, what it's connected to locally and where it goes to the far end, to help plan and to see if there's any pre-provisioned connections or ones left over from previous projects or some form of decommission or change. Very quick, very simple, and that's on everything. So any device, any Visio diagram has that drill down capability. Just to show you another perspective, if I go back to this network diagram, I can drill on this firewall. There's the firewall. I can then do a port trace to see what switches it's connected to, and I can bring this out as a textual report if necessary, so we can just verify and check. You can see which cabinets is all the equipment's connected to, what's connected. There may be labels on cables. We've even got here the power connection. I'm not having to create any new documents. AssetGen's creating them for you. So there's a lot of capabilities, there's many other features. I'm just going to finish on two specific things for data center planners. In the menu system we have this planning role where we have cabinet search and batch impact analysis, and the aim here is to try and reduce the effort gathering and getting information to make planning choices. So we'll do cabinet search first. Cabinet search will allow us to find available space and resources by using the database to summarize for us. So let's give you an example. I know I want to put a server into a computer room. I don't want to put it anywhere else, but I want to put it into a server rack, and I want to know that there's enough power budget. And this is the way I would do it. I would select the computer room. I would then get AssetGen to filter out by function all the server cabinets. As you can see, it's quite flexible, quite interactive. We may require, say, 6U of space for the server, and also from a power perspective, let's take the cabinet power rating and then take the design or derated value for the equipment and say that I need at least 300 watts of headroom, and do run. And this is now summarized. We have a number of racks that all have available space and power. If I click on any rack, I click here on rack 204, that's the layout of the rack. If I want to go into that rack and actually start doing planning, I just do a right click, and that takes us into rack 204, so I can now start planning that equipment, doing other works in there. But I already know I've got the power and spaces budget. When I've put equipment in there, that will now impact the Visio floor plans, the rack layouts, and if we connect things together, it will now appear also on network diagrams as well. So you can see the integrated nature of what we do. The key thing there is I didn't have to run lots of reports. The planning feature helped us quickly get to the point where I knew what my options were, and you can tailor it and modify it. The other feature that is also quite unique to what we have is called batch impact analysis. I'll go into this. This helps us plan major transitions or major changes. So if I want to drop the power to part of the room, if I want to move a whole load of racks from one place to another, this will give us effectively a list of hardware impacts, which we can then follow up by a list of change or service impacts. So let's take you through this. Effectively, it's a set of filters. We can store the filters, so for major projects like, say, planned power downs, we can actually plan this in advance and then rerun and take account of any changes. So I'm going to just show you how it would look. So say we want to power down a power distribution unit with all its circuit breakers on the side of the room. So this now selects the PDU, and just to read you through how it would work, we would do an inventory of that PDU, because we may do an inventory of multiple switches that we're replacing, multiple servers we're moving, there's a range of things. It's then going to trace the power connectivity to all the power strips. It's then going to take that result and then trace the connectivity of those power strips to any SAN switches, Unix boxes or Windows boxes, and then finally it's going to take any connectivity from the SAN switches to Unix and Windows servers that may be outside of the racks but actually would be impacted by the power down because they would lose connection to storage. And then we extract, and this then builds us a list. Here's a list of all the servers that would be impacted. I'll just sort that. And that's the first stage, which is a hardware impact. If you have our system mapping software, or you have access to a CMDB where we've taken data into our system mapping software, we can then use that to do a change impact analysis from different perspectives. And so you're really using someone else's information to say, what's the business impact? So these devices, server win 001, would impact these various business functions. I haven't had to go and log into another system. I've used that data to help with my understanding of planning, or it might be software. So what software would be impacted, or what applications, and lots of different ways. So this is all the software that would be impacted. And you can sort in many ways and get spreadsheet outputs to then work out the best ways to mitigate any risks or to try and meet any particular timing requirements from various change approvers. Really complex thing to do, but we built these features in here because this actually saves a lot of time rather than having to do this manually and sorting through existing data sets. I hope that's given you a quick understanding of specific things that help with data center planning and management in AssetGen Connect. There is obviously a lot more to the system. We'd recommend you assess what you currently have in terms of spreadsheets and diagrams that help you with the planning processes, and how confident you are in the information that you have and the amount of consistency, so it's easy to maintain and keep up to date. Obviously with AssetGen there's not much data really to maintain because actually we've consolidated a lot of it into a database. So there's a lot of time and resource saved, but actually is also useful if you understand how much you spend doing this, or how much it would cost to actually take all your existing information sets and make them better and baseline them. Please contact us if this is of interest to you via either our websites. We can do an introduction or online demo and take it a little bit further. We do have a time-limited evaluation version that you can put your own data into, and we'll do a bit of hand-holding to help you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you want these benefits, we can help put together an implementation plan and a proposal to help support you in whatever way you need to get this system delivering those benefits. So thank you very much for your time. My name is David Cuthbertson, and I hope you found this video useful.